You are now tuned in to Damn Good Advice, a podcast where we bring you the cream of the crop in finance, relationship, and all-around life information from special guests. Remember to share this podcast, and if you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe while you're at it. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Damn Good Advice. Today I'm joined here with Kenn Turner from Massachusetts Life Sciences. How you doing today, Kenn?
I'm great, JD. How are you, brother?
Doing well. It's great to have you on. How about you start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm not sure where you want to start, but I'm a native of Louisiana. I grew up in a small town in the northeast of the state, Monroe, Louisiana. I actually ran into former mayor of New Orleans just last week, and I mentioned that while I lived in Boston for the last 30 years, that I'm a native of Monroe, Louisiana, and he lit up and he goes, "God, you still claim Monroe as home." I said, I hadn't thought about it, Mr. Mayor. And he insisted I call him Mitch. And I said, I hadn't thought of that. But yes, I'm a native of Monroe, Louisiana, and I still claim it.
Yeah.
And so I went on to Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and that's where I received my commission in the Navy in 1980 when I graduated, dating myself as you do the math, and then went on to a career in the Navy where I spent 26 years, first as a nuclear weapons officer in the submarine force, and then on for roughly 20 years in the reserves where I served as commanding officer of 3 different reserve units, 3 based out of Sub-base Pearl down in Hawaii, 1 with an admiral staff at New London, and then on to the Pentagon, where I served on the OPNAV staff just about until I retired. In parallel, I was fortunate enough to pursue a career in the private sector, first with Hallmark Cards in Kansas City, Missouri, where I did a couple of years in their executive training program, and then went on to do a stint in new product development, where we launched the first line of computerized greeting cards in the history of the industry, and then on to new business strategy. And then I went on to run a $80-90 million business unit, which launched the first line of black greeting cards on a permanent basis in the industry, which is still available today. It's called Mahogany.
Wow.
Then I came to New England in 1995 to work at Hasbro Toy Company in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, where I did new product development, and then on to a internet startup called Africana.com for Skip Gates and Anthony Appiah from the Du Bois Center at Harvard College, which we then sold to Time Warner. And then ultimately, when AOL and Time Warner merged, I became an executive at AOL. Time Warner is responsible for emerging markets, where we launched AOL Black Voices, which was the largest black website in the world, AOL Latino, which was the largest Latino website in the world, and then AOL for Small Businesses, which was the largest entrepreneur website in the world.
Wow. So this was in the early 2000s?
This was 2000 to 2005.
Nice. Right around the tech bubble, right?
It was right at the tech bubble.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember in 2000 when I came over to AOL from Hasbro, one cover story of Time magazine had Jeff Bezos as kind of like, this wizard. And then a few months later had Jeff Bezos on the cover as like, Dr. Evil. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I guess you could pick which one you want to believe. As my grandma would say, God rest her soul, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But yes, I remember when nobody got Amazon. Like, who would want to go and buy a book online when you could go to Barnes & Noble or some bookstore down the street?
Exactly.
And I'm a lover of books, and so I totally, frankly, didn't get it either. And look at us now. So, I remember.
Now you buy everything from Amazon.
Everything.
Everything.
Your grocery, your prescriptions, everything.
Library
Amazing.
turned into a Walmart.
Yeah, he's, he's flying into space. Right?
Yeah.
Like all rich white guys. Right? Yeah. That's the ultimate now, right?
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean,
as a kid who wanted to fly into space, I'm a little bit envious. But.
Well, you've accomplished quite a bit in your life. I mean, definitely. There's no doubting that. And I also want to thank you for serving in the military for this country.
I'm always a little bit thrown off when people say thank you for your service. I really struggle with that a lot, and I'm dead serious. My dad served. All 5 of my brothers served. My oldest sister served. I have 3 brothers who actually fought in Vietnam, in country, and are combat vets, not just vets, but combat vets. I served for 26 years in the Cold War. Our combined service between all of us is just under 70 years, and I'm very proud of that. But when people say to me, thank you for your service, it just seems odd to me, because to me, service was a privilege and an honor. Awesome. And when I think about, all the things that I've done in the private sector and now in government where I served, is Deputy Secretary of Veteran Services and CFO for Governor Patrick, and then for 7 years at the Port Authority at Massport under Governor Patrick and then Governor Baker, and now as the head of the Life Science Center. I am most honored by the privilege to have served my country in uniform. And so to me, service was a privilege.
So here on Damn Good Advice, we like to kick things off with one question. And that question is, reflecting on your life, what is one piece of advice you could give yourself looking back?
That's a great question. Hindsight's 20/20, right? So when you're looking back, I've tried to live my life, as corny as it sounds, without regret. And what I mean by that is I don't spend a whole lot of time looking in what I call the rearview mirror. I think that as human beings, we are destined to make mistakes. We are destined to screw things up. We're destined to get it wrong. And to me, that's just a given. That's as instinctual and as factual as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. And so I've rarely reflected on, what would the 64 me tell the 24 me? Because there's not a whole lot I would do differently, to be honest with you, even the times that I screwed up, even the times that I failed, because I think that we learn, if you're open to it, from our failures and not from our successes. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah.
But I think if I were to give myself advice in hindsight, maybe I would just tell myself to have a little bit more patience. I was pretty impatient, but I think in the end that impatience, helped to motivate and to drive me to always try to achieve and to have ambition about taking on more responsibility, about trying to do more, about trying to accomplish more, about trying to do better. There's not a lot I would do differently. And frankly, outside of just simply saying maybe being a little bit more patient with myself, that's about all I could come up with.
That's pretty great, especially from someone as successful as yourself. So let's talk a little bit more about exactly what you do in your current position.
So the Massachusetts Life Science Center is an economic investment and development entity formed in 2008 by statute. And our mission is to ensure that Massachusetts is preeminent or number one in the life science space. To give you a little bit of history behind this. In 2008, as you may recall, we were, in the throes of a worldwide recession, the likes of which we hadn't seen since the Great Depression. President Obama was just being sworn into office, and the world economy was crashing. As I recall, the unemployment rate was high enough that economists and pundits were comparing it to the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And we had some 15 plus million people out of work, myself included, and folks over 50 in large swaths were even giving up even looking for work. In the height of that, Governor Patrick, who, by the way, is only the second black governor in the history of the United States to be elected post-Reconstruction, was trying to figure out how to navigate Massachusetts through this incredible financial crisis. And so working with the legislature, they were bold enough to come up with this idea of we're going to muster the combined intellect of Massachusetts' people. Massachusetts has more advanced degrees and more PhDs on a per capita basis than any other state in the United States. That's one of the data points.
It's incredible.
And so as I talked to Governor Patrick just a few months ago when I took over this job, I asked him, how'd you guys come up with this idea of investing in driving Massachusetts to be the number one state when it comes to life sciences? Because we weren't at the time. We had a fledgling life science ecosystem here at the time. They passed legislation to form the Life Science Center and gave the center $1 billion to invest in the ecosystem over 10 years. In a reauthorization in 2018 under the Baker-Polito administration, working with the legislature, we were given an additional $623 million. So in effect, the Life Science Center was given $1.5 billion to make Massachusetts number one in life sciences. And so let's talk about that investment, for a moment. So we've invested roughly $900 million into the ecosystem here in Massachusetts, which has generated a leveraged investment of $4.9 billion of leveraged dollars. We've invested roughly $500 million of capital investments in the ecosystem over the last 14 years since our inception, and that has generated roughly $1.7, $1.8 billion of capital investment. We are number one in the ecosystem when we think about the world in life sciences, not just Massachusetts, but the world. We have more NIH investment on a per capita basis in Massachusetts. We have more VC dollars. I think somewhere in the neighborhood between 6 to 7 billion, based on what you read, in terms of VC investments in the life science industry. We have more PhDs, more advanced degrees, as I said earlier. We have 18 of the top 20 global biopharmas have a footprint here in Massachusetts. All 3 vaccines, up until the new one that was just approved by the FDA a couple of weeks ago, but the initial ones, the 3 initial, the Moderna, the J&J, and the Pfizer, were all, if you think about it, born here in Massachusetts. So I think it's, hindsight being 2020, or as JFK famously said, that, success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. That the vision that Governor Patrick, Governor Baker, and the legislature had for Massachusetts as being a leader in the space has more than paid off. From our intern programs, from our women's health programs, from our D&I programs like our Mass Next Gen, which is a program that's targeting women entrepreneurs in the life science space.
Sweet.
And as I think about next year and next year's budget, I'm already working with my team to think about how we expand that program beyond its 5th year now, to not only renew the program, but think about how we might launch a new program that's a Mass Next Gen program that's targeting people of color who are entrepreneurs in the life science space. So that's what we do at the Life Science Center.
That's completely awesome. I love what you guys do. You guys do a lot of investing, and so I want to focus on that. Let's talk about investing, whether it be investing in yourself, investing in others, or investing in equities. How important is investing to you?
Oh, it's incredibly important. I served as the head of DE&I for the Port Authority for 7 years before assuming this role about 19 months ago. I point to that 7 years of being at Massport because while I was there, we launched a business development innovation that became known as the Massport model. Massport's stream of revenue comes from primarily 3 sources.
Okay.
One is the airport, because Massport operates Logan International Airport, Hanscom General Aviation Field. The second stream of revenue for Massport is Massport owns and operates the terminals at the Port of Boston. The third revenue stream, which most people don't think about, is Massport owns billions of dollars of real estate in and around the harbor. So if you look at the Seaport District, which is the newest neighborhood in the city of Boston, a lot of that real estate is owned by Massport. And those parcels of land in the Seaport District and in East Boston, which surrounds the water, Massport makes a lot of money on letting those leases out to developers, giving them a long-term lease, normally about 99 years, and then reaping both, the income that comes from, the build of whatever is built on that parcel. And then, so what we were able to do in concert with, tremendous leadership from the CEO at the time, Tom Glenn, who I worked for and reported to directly, and our board, was to come up with a notion where we said that when we lease or let our next RFP on a major parcel in the Seaport District, which was at the time the hottest real estate in the United States, that we were going to make it a requirement that not only would you have minority participation as part of your project that you put before the approval committee, but that we were going to make ownership and equity part of the requirement, in effect elevating diversity, equity, and inclusion to an equal criteria to design and development, to access to capital, and to how much money we make on the project. And so that became known as the Massport model and is now being taught at Harvard Kennedy School of Government as well as Harvard Business School. And so with that backdrop, that's the mindset that I brought to this job. It isn't just good enough to say we're going to have minorities participate in whatever business development venture we're engaged in, which typically, frankly, to be blunt about it, normally meant some minor participation, the crumbs on the floor as I think about it.
Right.
I'm saying, nope, they're going to have an equal stake in the ownership of the project. They're going to be sitting at the table, elbow to elbow with the big developers, and they're going to eat steak and not crumbs.
That's great. I love it. I always like to ask the guests before we leave if there's one quote that really stuck out to you that you wouldn't mind sharing with the listeners today.
Oh, it's great. Hard because I read a lot and I love, the Greek tragedies. I'm a huge fan of Shakespeare. I don't know if I could pick a single quote, but what I would say is there are quotes that I try to live by.
Okay.
One is from Hamlet. The father Polonius escorting his son Laertes to the ship where he's supposed to sail from England to France. And he's talking to his son and giving him advice. And there's a whole long list in this monologue that he tells him about how to dress, how to behave, how to purport himself as a man. But at the very end, he says, "But this above all else, to thine own self be true." And I love that. And I love that phrase, "to thine own self be true." Another is from Hamlet too, which I love, which was...
share it. Let's hear it.
which was something to the effect of, I think it's Hamlet in a soliloquy, where he says, nothing is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. And I just love that phrase. Because what it says to me is that as human beings, we make judgments.
Yeah.
Nothing is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. We make a judgment.
Absolutely.
We make it good or we make it bad. Now, granted, there are things that are good and bad. I most certainly believe
inherently.
Inherently murder, rape, pillaging.
Powerful message. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Well, Ken, I think that's all for today. It's been fantastic having you on.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Damn Good Advice with your host, JD Lewis. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe if you're tuned in on YouTube.